I'm your host, Bobby Oliveira, and welcome to Faithful Fridays. This is a space for honest conversations, biblical truth, and encouragement for everyday life. The kind that makes us slow down, think deeper, and look at things through God's Word. Because around here, pleasing God is the goal.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Faithful Fridays. Before we get started, I do want to say that I have waited last minute again. Today is Thursday and tomorrow I need to post this episode. With that being said, today is Thursday, which means that tonight is family devotion at my house. So it is currently 7:30 almost, and I am recording this episode before our family devotions. With that being said, just know that if you hear background noise, it's just my husband, it's just my children. Please ignore it. Focus on the words that I am saying. Okay, thank you. Now, last week we talked about Jehovah-Sabaoth, meaning the Lord of hosts. And we saw how God reigns over everything and commands the heavens' armies. But this week, we're going to see how personal that same God really is. Because the Lord of hosts is also Jehovah-Rohi, the Lord our shepherd. And girl, I am so glad about that, because knowing what I learned about sheep recently, they don't lead themselves well. I actually learned quite a lot doing this study, because I'm going to be very honest right now. I have never been the type of person who studies different places, animals, creatures, none of that, right? I'm just here trying to survive on Earth. That's it. I've always kind of been that way. I don't even keep up with the news, okay? So that was something about me. So when this name of God was next in line, I knew that I needed to learn something about sheep. Okay. And honestly, I'm not sure why I never thought learning about sheep mattered before now, because if that's what God compares me to, shouldn't I want to know why? And being a sheep of God, it honestly helps me understand why I do the things that I do. Why I wonder sometimes. Why I panic sometimes. Why I struggle sometimes, and why I try to run ahead of God sometimes. Because truth is, sheep don't naturally know the way. They need their shepherd. So let's talk about these sheep. Now, fun fact about me is I am a word nerd, okay? I love a good word study, because a lot of terms that we read in the Bible don't always mean what we think they mean biblically. So, Jehovah-Rohi means the Lord my shepherd, and the word Rohi comes from the Hebrew word Ra'ah, which means to shepherd, to feed, to tend, to pasture, and to take care for. So when the Bible says Jehovah-Rohi, it's not just saying God owns the sheep. A shepherd doesn't just stand back and say, well, you got yourself in it, now you can get yourself out. That sounds more like an 80s mom to me, not God. The Bible is teaching us that God, our shepherd, doesn't move like that with helpless sheep. He gets involved. It's saying that he leads us. He feeds us. He watches over us. He corrects us, protects us, and cares for us. And he keeps going after the hard-headed sheep that keep wandering off. Another thing that I learned about sheep, they recognize the shepherd's voice. And that matters a lot, especially spiritually, because there are a lot of voices trying to lead us. I'm actually in the process of doing a study on that. If you are part of my Facebook group, then you know that we do a bi-monthly sit down and talk about it. And that is what I'm working on currently for next month. Now back to this podcast. A lot of voices are trying to lead us. Culture tells us, do what makes you happy. Feelings tell us, if it feels right, it must be right. And social media tells us, follow yourself. And other people tell us, it's not that serious. And our flesh tells us, you can do it your own way. But that's not what Jesus said. In John chapter 10 and verse 27, Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. How beautiful is it to be known by God? Not just seen, but known. Psalm 139 says that God knows our down sitting and our uprising. He knows our thoughts afar off. God knows everything about his sheep. The good, the bad, the struggles, the fears, and the wandering. And he still calls them his. He still calls me his. His voice, not a stranger's voice, not culture, not feelings, not whatever everybody else is doing. Because sheep follow the shepherd they belong to. So here's a real question. If we aren't reading his word to hear him speak to us, can we really say that we follow him? And even more, can we honestly say that we're his sheep? Some interesting facts that I learned about sheep was they don't always understand where the shepherd is leading them. And to tackle that spiritually, that can be hard for us. Because sometimes God leads us in ways that don't make immediate sense to us. This podcast, for example. And we want answers before obedience. We want the full plan before we move. And we want clarity before we surrender. But sheep don't always understand the direction of the shepherd. They just learn to trust the one that's leading them. Sheep also need daily care. They need food, water, and guidance on a daily, because they can't lead themselves long without getting into trouble. And spiritually, neither can we. That's why our relationship with God cannot survive just off of one Sunday service a week or one Wednesday night Bible study. We need him daily. Give us this day our daily bread. That wasn't just talking about food. We should be in the word daily. That's really important because sheep are also vulnerable when they're isolated. A sheep separated from the flock becomes easier prey. And spiritually, the same thing can happen to us. Because when we decide to isolate ourselves, we stop hearing correction. We stop hearing encouragement. We stop hearing truth clearly. And after a while, we can start listening to ourselves more than we listen to God. Let me tell you what humbles me about sheep. It's that they can't protect themselves well. And that humbles me because it reminds me that I'm not as strong, independent, and in control as I think that I am. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a very strong person. My testimony, if you knew it, can show that. But strength and self-sufficiency are not the same thing. And I think a lot of people get those confused. I was once one of those people who got that confused. Because the world teaches us that needing nobody is strength. But biblically, that's actually pride a lot of times. Real strength is being able to lean on God instead of pretending that we don't need Him. A lot of times, I believe that He has sent people to me that I needed for that season of my life. And I know that it was Him because that person was exactly what I needed to get me through that time of my life. Real strength says, I can definitely endure hard things, but I still absolutely need the shepherd. Talking about strength and not needing people. Okay, let's speak specifically about women. Actually, let's speak especially to women, because the world tells us you don't need a man. And for anybody who thinks that way, I'm going to just say, speak for yourself, okay? Because I needs mine. My husband protects me. He cares about my physical health and my mental health. He helps guide me when my emotions are too loud for me to think straight. He provides for me. And believe it or not, He has come and got me when I wandered. Now, don't get this twisted. Not in adultery. I have never stepped outside of my marriage. But before we were married, I wasn't always committed to Him the way that I should have been. And He didn't just leave me out there in the world to wander with other men or my own lustful self. He came and got me. Okay, He basically came, got me, and claimed me. So yes, I need my husband. But even with all of that being true, my husband is still not my shepherd. Yes, he can protect me. Yes, he can guide me and provide for me in some ways. But only God can shepherd my soul. And spiritually speaking, we definitely were not created to live independent from God. We were literally made in His image, a reflection of Him, and in a way we ought to move like His shadow. Not us leading Him, not running ahead of Him, and not choosing our own path and then asking Him to bless it. But instead, following so closely that our life reflects Him. Because a shadow never goes ahead of the person casting it. It follows their movement. So if we belong to God, we should be following Him. And for me now, that's why verses like Isaiah 53:6 make so much sense. All we like sheep have gone astray. Because drifting comes naturally to sheep. And if I'm being real with you, it comes naturally to me too. And not because I accidentally lose God. I've never accidentally lost God. But because my flesh naturally wants its own way. I want control. I want what feels right in the moment. And I want to lead myself sometimes. And sometimes we wander spiritually thinking that we know better than the shepherd. And now, this is where you're probably going to look at me differently. I hope you don't, but you might. But when I first started to study for Jehovah-Rohi, I knew that I had to study Psalm 23. Because, well, why not, right? It literally says in the first verse, the Lord is my shepherd. So, I turned to Psalm 23 and I thought, wow, okay, it's only 6 verses. But then I thought, wow, this is only 6 verses. And that's when I became much more awake to what I was really feeling. Part of me felt ashamed because this psalm has been sitting in my Bible the whole time. And in my almost 15 years of being a Christian, I had never read Psalm 23. I never read it. I knew the first verse, hence why I knew to do Psalm 23 in this podcast episode, and maybe half of the second verse, but I had never really sat with it. Not to study it and not to really understand it. And now I understand it completely different. I can't say completely different because I never read it to understand it to begin with, but now I understand it because now I know that David wasn't just writing pretty words or nice poetry. He wrote what he understood, and what David understood was shepherding. Because at his core, David was a shepherd. That's what he was when we're first introduced to him in Scripture. Before the king title, before the battles, and before the throne, David was a shepherd. And looking at David's life and reading a lot of the Psalms, because, I went down a whole rabbit hole studying this name of God, I started realizing something. David knew what it felt like to need a shepherd, which is interesting because David was a shepherd. But he understood when to be a sheep and when to be a shepherd. He went astray. Psalm 119 and 176 says, I have gone astray like a lost sheep. He had fear. Psalm 56 and 3 says, what time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. He needed guidance. Psalm 25 and 4 says, show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy paths. He needed protection. Psalm 17 and 8 says, keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. David got distracted and he followed the wrong things. 2 Samuel 11 shows us that David fell into sin with Bathsheba. And Psalm 51 shows us David repenting after that sin. And I think that's what gives Psalm 23 so much depth. Because this isn't just David writing poetry. This is a sheep talking about his shepherd. So let's walk through this short but very rich psalm together. And I'm going to give it to you in the way that I understand it through my studies. Now, if your understanding is different, please email me and let me know. Comment on this and let me know. Just let me know how your understanding of it is if it's different from mine. Okay. David starts out by saying, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And immediately that changes everything because David did not say the Lord is my assistant. He said the Lord is my shepherd. Meaning David understood that his dependence was on God. Sheep do not survive because they know everything. They survive because they stay near the shepherd. And when he said, I shall not want, that doesn't mean that God gave him every little thing he desired. It means the shepherd provides what the sheep truly need. And then David says, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Sheep do not rest well when they feel unsafe. So when David talks about resting, he's talking about trusting. The shepherd creates safety for the sheep. Then David says, He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I want you to notice that David says God restores his soul. Because people try to restore themselves with all kinds of things. Money, success, relationships, entertainment, social media, validation. But none of those things can truly restore a tired soul. The shepherd restores the sheep, and he leads them in righteousness, not just comfort. Meaning God is not only concerned with making us feel good. He's concerned with leading us right. And sometimes the right path is uncomfortable. Sometimes righteousness stretches us, corrects us, and convicts us. But the shepherd leads for our good, not just our comfort. Then David goes on to say, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Now, this one is where I felt it a little bit too, because I noticed that David didn't say he avoid valleys. He said, I'll walk through them. Sheep still walk through dangerous places. But the difference is the shepherd is with them. And for us, we are going to go through things. We're going to go through things that are unavoidable. We just are. But the difference is if the shepherd is with us. And then David says, Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now, the rod represented protection. And when you study the Bible, rods were often connected with authority, power, correction, and deliverance. Moses held a rod when God used him to lead Israel. So when David says, Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, my studies show me that he's talking about the shepherd's authority comforts him. His guidance comforts him. And even his correction comforts him. I know for me personally, I love to be corrected by God. A lot of people don't like to be corrected by God. That's why they don't follow God. But I love to be corrected by God because I know that if I'm being corrected, then that is God's grace that is allowing me to try to get it right next time. Because sheep that trust the shepherd are comforted by his leadership. And then David closes by saying, Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What a beautiful, beautiful ending. The sheep that stayed with the shepherd ended up home. That's my goal. That is my goal, to end up home with my shepherd. Is that your goal? I hope so. So I want to leave you with this. Jehovah-Rohi reminds us that God is not distant. He leads, guides, protects, corrects, and restores. And sheep were never designed to lead themselves. Spiritually speaking, neither were we. So, that's all that I have on this name of God, Jehovah-Rohi. But I want to thank you for joining me today. I pray this episode encouraged you to stay close to the shepherd, to trust him more, to follow him closely, and to stop trying to carry what was never meant to be carried without him. Definitely, it encouraged me not only to stay close to the shepherd, but to continue to study his word, Bobby Sue, Because honestly, nobody even told me that that psalm only had 6 verses. Okay? Nobody told me that. I just didn't pick up my Bible to read it. Now, before we go, I do have an announcement. If you are a lady in the area to me and would like to join us for our Ladies' Day next month, June the 20th, it's on a Saturday, it will be at the Selma Church of Christ in Selma, North Carolina. I'll have all the information down in the description box, and I would absolutely love to meet you if you are able to join us. And Lord willing, I will be back faithfully next Friday with Abba. I think it's Abba. It's either Abba or Abba, but it means Father. Because once we understand God as shepherd, we also need to understand that the closeness and relationship He desires with His children. Until then, remember, stay in the Word, stay faithful.